Battery?
Yeah. The Lord is faithful.
And
He is good.
And is.
You rolling? All right, awesome.
Hello.
What's up, everybody?
We added more furniture.
We added more
to our living room
because we got a friend. Indeed, Dr. DeAaron Washington. Doctor. Now, when I met you, you wasn't a doctor. You were just DeAaron.
I know. I was just a little old master's student trying to get my thing together.
So I want you to know, it means a lot to me that you come into your kingdom and you still remember me. I appreciate that. You know? I try. Man. Here's a fun fact. So when I first moved to the city, I don't know if I ever told you this, but you was my first coffee meeting slash thing. You know.
Look at that, man.
And I remember we come a long way.
I know. Now you a whole pastor.
A whole pastor.
A whole ministry.
A whole ministry.
Reverend D-Ray.
Okay.
Oh.
Push it. Give him a inch. Don't take him on.
Sometimes I have to remember to call him pastor. Maybe forget.
No, that's fun though. So I appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what's been going on in your world? How's life?
Life, living in pursuit of happiness, man. I just got this PhD. I'm taking it for a spin, just a little bit, so been presenting, trying to think about writing some things.
Would you encourage our people to also pursue PhDs?
Would I encourage them to get a PhD? Let me give you my quick note about that.
Okay.
I think PhDs are great, but it's that sense of like you ought to know what you want to do when you're getting it. It's too much of a sacrifice. It costs too much for you to go in there and just be fiddling around with things.
Yeah.
I think you want to think about what do you want to do. In my field, like I think the thing, if you want to teach or train, get a PhD. Sure. But you can actually get some other trainings and be pretty sufficient as like a counselor without a PhD.
Now, what did you get your PhD in?
Counselor education and supervision. So that's my particular focus was in like multicultural counseling on cultural humility, how people handle culture.
What did you write your thesis on? What was the title of your thesis?
You want? Can I get? let me.
Go ahead.
I know it's long.
This is your time to kind of plug in what you study. So do you think?
So my long title is the impact of cultural humility and engaging cultural opportunities on influence on the supervisory working alliance.
Yeah, that is.
I know exactly what that means. Yeah.
Really, it's
so
just
break it down for us. What does that mean?
Right. That just means as supervisors are supervising counseling students or like provisionally licensed counselors, how are they handling the issue of culture? And are they not just dispositional in their humility in the sense that it's a personality trait? Are there moments where they enact cultural humility? They engage culture when it comes up naturally. And they don't run away from like those moments. And my really study was looking at, hey, when you do that, how does it affect supervisory relationship? When you do that, it does improve the supervisory relationship. And there are things that go on in culture that happens inside of supervision or inside of the counseling thing that not many people acknowledge. But the more you acknowledge it, the more you talk about it and engage it with humility. Humility in the sense of like, you ain't got to know everything. There's no way to know everything.
Sure.
Yeah.
But if you just have a willingness, a curiosity, and compassion, like that builds that relationship. Sure. And that's just not in supervision, but it's also in counseling too. I mean, I would say also in churches and ministry. In churches and ministry.
Right. So understanding the background and the culture in which somebody comes from is important when you're counseling somebody. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it is. And even to the point, like, I would point the finger back on the counselor in the sense of like, it's important for them to know. If they're not clear about their own culture, they don't even know how it's showing up in session. So yes, I want to know about my clients, but I need to know about me because there's some beautiful things that I think God gives people in culture that, man, I can utilize in my counseling practice.
Right.
But there are also some challenging things that I ought to be aware of so that I don't bring too much of me inside a session and cause more harm than help.
Interesting. Now, I want to ask you this.
Interesting balance.
Yeah, I want to ask you this because it seems like, evidently you could have written about a million things, right? There's a lot of things to say. Why did you choose that aspect of counseling? Why the cultural angle?
Yeah, I mean, like, man, I've just, in my time, I've just seen how people have mishandled culture. And I've seen how people have not acknowledged culture. If I can, just be blunt, different things like that. I think people who are in the majority culture have a hard time realizing that they're part of a culture. Now, that's not just me. You go to why black kids are sitting together, all the black kids are sitting together in the cafeteria by Baylor. Yeah, by Beverly Daniel Tatum.
I haven't read it, but I heard it's a phenomenal book.
It's
Right,
really
it is. And she talks about how people in the majority culture have a hard time.
Like racial identity.
Right, racial identity, because they have a very individualistic culture.
Yeah.
But I think my profession is mostly those who are in the majority. And if I can help them realize, hey, you do have a culture. Your culture shows up in your values, in your interventions, in your skills, and even in your models. That helps them to treat well those who are black and brown and come into their spaces. So I thought my dissertation's way of just serving like the community, and not just in that, but also in those who are supervising counseling, because yes, counselor has to get supervision too. And if the supervisor ain't recognizing their culture, then the counselor ain't gonna recognize the culture either, and they not gonna recognize with the client.
So let's look at the other side of it. What does it mean? Why is it important for the person, the counselee? I don't know if I just made that word up. I don't have a PhD. But why is it important for the person who's coming in for counseling to understand the importance of, their background, their culture, and things of that nature? Yeah.
And I mean, I would start even to a point, just a biblical basis for a moment, the sense of like that we're all made in the image of God.
Absolutely.
And God has intentionally given us cultural distinctives. And there are beautiful parts to them that if I don't learn about them and engage them, I might be missing out on strengths that are innate in me. And I may be missing out on strengths that are innate in my culture.
And that goes for all cultures.
Right, that goes for all cultures. Wow. But also, if I don't acknowledge my culture, I may not acknowledge the blind spots that I have.
Yeah.
I may not acknowledge the blind spots that I have. And if I don't acknowledge that, man, I'm walking around thinking that my stuff is normal. When at the end of the day, I've actually been a fish in water. And I didn't realize that until I stepped in somebody else's pond. So it's that sense why I think clients need to realize that, because, man, you can lean into that strength. You can lean to, man, I'll go, for example, the sense like you think about being from an African-American culture. It's a very strong religious orientation in that culture.
Right.
So it's like, man, if I'm working with a client, I'm going to ask about like their religious background. And then I'm going to ask, hey, how does that help you? What strengths is that giving you? Like, what have you read in the word like lately and things like that? And guess what? You can speak the language, because even in the African American church, whether you learned it formally or informally, like there are just certain phrases, there's certain things that
like what?
There's certain things, like even to the point like you think about something of God can make a way out of no way. Like that helps people. If people can lean into that,
you are. It's not working.
He was ready for it. He's ready for it. But it's just like, if I can help a person lean into that to be like, hey, that applies to your situation. Do you know that? It may look like there's no help for change. There's nothing that can be changed. But if our God can make something out of nothing, then this is something that can help even in our counseling to be like, hey, we're looking to God to make something happen when it seems like nothing ain't gonna happen. Can I give another example? Then I'm done. I'm getting ready to close. But it's also that sense of like being from African American culture. I'm going back to like my ancestors and how like slavery was a very detrimental time. It was a scary thing. It was a hard thing. But they believed that they could be free. Why? Why would they believe they could be free when everything in man's world said, y'all should be in chains. You ain't gonna never get out of chains. It's them that said they held on. They had a creative way of having hope. And if I can help clients to lean into that creative way of having hope, like, man, that helps to fuel them to be like, yes, it's hard. We've had some regressions. We've like gone back a couple of times. Like people have changed on you, but you still find a way to kind of have hope because your ancestors found a way to have hope. Like that's innate in you. Like let's lean into that, even though circumstances looks difficult and hard and unchangeable.
No, that's really, really good. I think our panel on Sunday was about mental health and stuff like that. You were really speaking a lot about religion and our belief system, how that plays a part into the counseling. And the panelists did a great job of talking about that as well. But I want to ask you, how is the challenge of our mental health, if we're experiencing a mental health challenge and we don't handle it properly, how can that affect our walk in relationship with the Lord?
Yeah. So I'm gonna get background, then I'm gonna.
You don't have to ask permission. We actually just do your thing. I'm gonna follow you.
I'm gonna walk forward.
I'm here to listen.
but I think we come back to think about that when sin came into the world, brokenness happened in a couple of ways.
Sure.
Man and God became broken. Then man and man became broken. But then there's also a sense like me, myself, and I don't always get along now. Like my body and my mind don't always act and don't always do the things that I wanted to do. So if there's a sense of like, this is the type of brokenness that affects me, that affects the world, then guess what? That weighs on my anxiety, it weighs on my depression, like that pulls me farther and farther down.
Yeah.
But if I don't acknowledge that, it just drags me farther and farther down. And then I don't acknowledge that, it drags me farther and farther down, and anxiety and depression. And guess what? That brokenness with God, it seems a bit further at some point in time, because I feel like I'm so lost, I'm so alone, I'm in this thing. And then that brokenness with man, guess what? I'm pulling away from people too. So it's that sense of like, hey, the thing I've actually been called to is to be in relationship with man. I've been called to do life with people. I've been called to live on one accord. But if I ain't taking care of my anxiety, the depression, the brokenness that is inside of me, it causes me not to commune with man. But not just that, it causes me to have false theology about God. Because in depressive states and in anxious states, and there's some other states I could talk about, but it distorts our view of God. It puts me in this dark place and makes me think, God didn't want to see me here. He didn't love me. I'm unlovable. I am actually the worst sinner here. And like, if that's the case, then like, guess what? You don't keep that in check. You only go farther and deeper down into this rather than communing with God and going to him, because you're leaning to your own understanding in that state. But I also want to give like some compassion there, because like, sometimes it's like, man, I don't know this. Yeah. I don't recognize these pieces that come up for me. Right. So I just stay stuck in those patterns because I've only learned one way of kind of handling things. So if I don't handle my mental health like things, like, man, that affects my walk with God, and it actually causes me not to do and not to even desire sometimes what God has called me to do, because my thinking is like that. But also the sense of, man, my body, the anxiousness, the tension that kind of comes in my body when anxiety arises. Like, if I don't take care of that, then guess what, man? I want to feel free in worship. I want to go and read the scriptures, but man, my body is just so like upticked, and I don't know how to bring it down, that I try to read the scripture, I try to read the verses, but I can't focus because my body is out of order. So it's like thinking through those things. Mental health, if I don't take care of those issues, like that impacts like how I commune with God, commune with others, and sometimes even how I think about myself.
So help us with that, because that's you highlighting something that they even highlighted on the panel on Sunday, specifically about how our mind, body, and soul are all connected, and like the health of one affects the health of the others, right? And so how would you encourage us, those of us who are in that space where like this is something new for them, they've never experienced it before, and they're having trouble navigating through it, they're having trouble getting into the word because they're having to venture through something they've never been a part of before. How would you encourage those people?
I would say first, give yourself the same grace God gives you. I would tell people that if you are washed in the blood of the Lamb, that no matter what you're struggling with, that's not something that's going to separate you from God. God is actually satisfied with you because of Jesus. So go from that place first. Realize that, hey, you are still saved, you're still justified. And even as you look throughout the scriptures, there's many people who had many struggles and had many things they cried out to God, many ways they felt, but still were never left and abandoned by God. So that's you. So two, I think there's also a piece of like saying, hey, if you realize that about yourself, just realize another thing. You can't fix this by yourself. You can't get yourself out of the hole by yourself. We're made in the image of God, and we're made to be relational beings. Right. So like there are just certain things we just can't handle by ourselves. Right. Let me give you some science just for a few minutes. But that sense of like we think about how we can bring down our emotions by ourselves, like that takes us about 20, 40 minutes. But if you got somebody who you care about help you with this, it takes milliseconds. So it's that sense like we're actually made to handle these things in relationship with people. And I think, even just saying that to say like, that means in a professional relationship with counselors, because they're trained, they have skills, they have ability to walk with you in ways that others don't just because of like their training. But I would say don't dismiss church. Don't dismiss your brothers and sisters in Christ that you're in discipleship with. Like, I think you need both of those.
Absolutely.
I think you need both. I think a good counselor who is working with your faith would say, hey, brother, you need to talk to your pastor. You need to talk to your church members. You need to talk to other people because you can't do this alone. So I think give yourself that grace. Don't do this alone. And then, like, if you need help, like, voice that. Vocalize and say, hey, I need help. Because guess what? If you vocalize that you need help, you were just vocalizing that you are human.
Yeah.
You're not vocalizing you're abnormal. You're vocalizing that you are just human. That God has said, yeah, you are insufficient in and of yourself. You need me. And you need other people. You're made for that.
Yeah, I know one of the things that yes.
I have a question. Okay, so for those of us who want to be a good friend to those who are struggling, and honestly, I mean, I also need friends that help me because I struggle a lot. But like, what are some tips that you would give people who their friends reach out and they need help, and you want them to like help them sort through that? But obviously, like, we're not professionals. What would you say to someone, like, how can we support our friends as they're going through all the things?
Yeah, no. And the model I try to think about for like people who are just trying to help, I think you think about the Good Samaritan. I think you go there and you think about there's some basic principles just from there. To think about that. There was a man who was wounded, lying on the side of the road, like needing help. And I think the first thing is just, hey, don't dismiss it.
Yeah.
Be with them and just say, hey, I'm showing up in a way I know how to show up. And sometimes that didn't look like I have to have the right words. That don't look like I have to have the right action. That just means to say, hey, maybe you're vocalizing, I don't know what to do, but I'm here for you in the ways that you need. Any way that you need me, like, and when you let me know, like, I'll be here for you. I don't know what to do, don't have the skills, don't have the training, but I want to show up for you. So I think there's one place of like saying, hey, I'm just going to be there for you. I'm going to show up for you. But then also at that point, the thing that kind of sticks in my mind about like the Good Samaritan story is like, you think about the priest and the Levite, like they saw the same thing, right? But they had wrong assumptions. They saw him and assumed that he was dead. They stayed far enough away to have a false assumption that that person's dead. The Samaritan got close enough in proximity.
You preaching now
to see. I got it.
Hallelujah.
But I know. But he got close enough to see that the man's lungs are still breathing air, and he's actually not dead. He's just wounded. And I think for us, when we want to be a good friend, we can't come in and just have these faulty assumptions that, oh man, you are just too beyond help. Yeah. You are just too much. Yes, sometimes like when you offer help, that your friends, they gonna call you, they gonna text you, they gonna email you, they gonna do all those things that may feel like, hey, they're just too much. But if we can really get closer and get closer and just say, they just people that need help. And they don't know any other way, and maybe there's not any other person in their life. So also there's a piece of like, hey, how do I spread this out? How do I help get other people involved in this to help them?
So it's not all on me every time.
It's not all on you. And it shouldn't be all on one person because that's just a lot of burden. That's a lot. That's why we got church. That's why we got community. Like nobody should be bearing that stuff alone. But also even you shouldn't be the one dependent person that your friend is dependent on. Like you got to spread that out.
That's good.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to ask you because earlier you mentioned about how we need to speak up when we struggle. You know, and it's okay because by confessing we're just confessing that we're human. But I think for some of us to struggle with that, including myself, is that we maybe we accidentally fall into this superhero complex where it's like, well, I don't want to confess that I'm human because I'm not. You know, like which was nothing we'll say out loud. But if we're not confessing that we're human, then like that's what we believe about ourselves. But my question to you is, how would you steer us away from that? Right? How would you encourage us to do away with that superhero complex and just lean into being human when you need to realize you're human the most?
Yeah, and I think one of the things is like, man, I go back to the scriptures and say, I think you got to go back to the cross.
That old rugged one.
That old rugged cross, because the same blood that you needed when you were first saved, you still need now. The cross is really a testimony that you can't do it by yourself. And you can never fix yourself. So I think it's that sense of going back to the cross, remembering that, but then also remembering that simple thing, you not God. And that if you can keep that in your mind, that you're not God, like that will keep you humble, that will keep you accurate, that will help you assess yourself to be like, I'm not God. You just need to say to yourself, I'm not God. Like that's what you need to do. Like I remember I was listening to a sermon by a pastor not too long ago, where he said, if you got a problem with that, I just need you to go to the last chapters of Job and just answer those questions. Answer the questions. Answer the questions that God presents. Where were you when the sand was being put down? Where were you when I told the winds to stop? And if you got to say, I wasn't there, if you got to say no,
you got to come off your house.
Then you got to come down a little bit. You got to come down a little bit. But also I think that sense of like, on the other side, realizing that actually asking for help is strength. Like it really is. it takes courage, it takes bravery to get to that point. And to flip it and help people say, when you don't ask for help, it may be you being cowardly and afraid. And that's not me shaming people, but I think most people think on the other side that like if you ask for help, that's you being cowardly, that's you being afraid. But I think it's the opposite. Right? It takes a lot more strength and bravery to say, I ain't got it, I can't do it by myself. So it's like, hey, saying I'm not God, it's like going back to Job, answering those questions, and me realizing and reframing in my mind that actually asking for help is a strength and it's a human thing. And it's, I gotta admit, the cross is testimony that I actually need help.
Yeah. I feel like some people feel like their burdens are not worth other people carrying, which like makes me feel sad because I'm like, I want to help you, but they feel like I got this, like kind of like not necessarily a superhero complex, but like I don't need to share this because I don't want to burden you with my burdens because they're not worth it to give that to someone else when it's already too hard for me, which is just a lie.
Yeah, we get into
like a total lie.
We get into the suffering Olympics. My thing ain't that big, but it's like, I think we need to realize that, man, we all suffer with the fallenness and brokenness of this world, and it's no small thing.
Yeah.
I think if people can come to a point, because at the end of the day, you can always compare yourself to somebody else and that has it worse. Like you can always do that, but you got to walk that out to the end. What happens if you just can keep comparing? You keep carrying stuff by yourself, and it gets heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier, and you're not casting your cares upon the Lord, but you also not confessing your sins to your brother and sister.
Right.
Like, so I think it is that sense. Like sometimes people are like, "Oh man, mine not that bad. I'm good. My testimony, that's all right." But I think we must acknowledge, like, man, if we're struggling with something, no matter big or small, like that's important. And even to the point, I think, just to realize something that God actually cares about that. That if he cares about the number of hairs on your head, he cares about your big and small struggles, and helping people to understand that, to be like, God cares about it all. There's nothing in this universe, nothing on earth that he is not mindful of. Yes, he looks high, he sits low. Like, what is it? Psalms 8 that says, like, he is mindful. What is we that we're mindful of us? Yeah. And he's mindful of all those things. And I think if he's mindful, he cares, he loves it, like, lean into that.
Yeah.
I think David does a good job of showing us about this. We read in Life Group this week a couple passages from the Psalms that David recorded when he was having moments of challenge in his mental health. Like one of them being Psalm 13, right? And one of the things that I found in common between the two passages that we read, I can't remember the other one, was how David always referred back to the Lord's faithful love for him. And so the way we wanted to ask you as a counselor, a professional counselor, why is it important that we as Christian believers anchor ourselves in God's character when we're struggling with mental health challenges? Yeah,
because if we let me go. Our mental health challenges, but also the world and external circumstances, they will always change. They are always sinking sand. But if we can lean on the unchanging character and nature of God, then like that gives us a steady rock to hang on to something that's not going to change on it. So I think that's the piece. Like when we're suffering, when we're going through certain things, like go back. I mean, this is why, I'll go back to even Lamentations, that whole nasty book that we got there, where it's talking about how lonely sits the city that used to be full of people, how the princes are now covered in soot and they used to be in white. Like it's bad in Jerusalem.
Right.
It's a bad time. But then he said in chapter 3, he said, "Yet I call this to mind. Great it is faithfulness. New mercies I have every morning." Because there is that something of like, man, yes, it may seem terrible. Things are not going great. But if I can hold on and remember the words of God and who he is, like that holds me. This is why Paul talks about in Philippians, hey, whatever's holy, whatever's honorable, whatever's delightful, like think on those things.
Yeah.
Because those are the things that are going to hold you and get you through, like when everything else is changing and falling apart.
Yeah. That's good. I appreciate that. Bri, you got a question?
Not yet.
All right. But no, this is good. This is very helpful. This is why I was sad when you texted me that you were sick. But we was praying for you though. We was praying for you.
And I'm well now. He answered.
Hallelujah.
No, but I think that why do you think? Oh, I want to ask you this. This is what I wanted to ask you. I couldn't remember. I asked this on the panel as well, but I want to hear your thoughts about it. What are the dangers of self-diagnosis? What are the dangers? Because I know it's easy to just go into self-diagnosis or even like run on social media and be like, or not even that, just Google and be like, I got a headache. You know, they'll tell you got cancer. But you really just need a Tylenol. Right? Yeah. But like, talk about that.
I think self-diagnosis like gives you like unnecessary anxiety, unnecessary depression because you lean into that. I think it's the world that we live in. Options are actually something that are, man, it's crazy. It's wild. There's so many things, so much access now. So self-diagnosis is just another one of those access points that we have. And I think going back to some of the things the panel said already, it's like, man, there are people who were trained and spent time in school to do this.
How long were you in school? How long did it take you to get your PhD from beginning to end?
4 years.
No. I mean, like from when the first time you got to school for counseling till you received your PhD.
Oh, master. Let's see, man. I started in 2012 and got done in 2023.
Ooh. 23 months. 20.
And we over here self-diagnosing
8 plus 3 is 11.
But don't go by my journey, you know. But also, I think that I think there's also a piece of like when we think about self-diagnosis too, is that we need to check people's credentials.
Yeah,
I think we really do because what gives a person the qualifications to do so? Because let me just tell you, I can Google a lot of things and make some sense of a lot of things and do a lot of things and make it sound pretty, make it sound smart, and make it sound believable. But if I ain't got the credentials to back it up, I'm like, bruh, what you doing? Like if the chiropractor is telling you that, you know what, these are the greatest hair products for you. I'm like, well, hey, bro, where your credentials at? Where your credentials? So if you're leaning and depending on somebody who don't have the right credentials to be giving you information, then like, man, you're trusting like these false prophets, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so important. Because I know it, like with us living in the social media world, it's just easy to do it that way, And I think, people have credentials for a reason. And so we should probably be mindful of those. Right. So let me ask you this, because we almost running out of time. What would you like to leave us with? Like if you can say anything about anything, it don't even have to be about mental health. What would you tell our 18 to 30-year-olds in our ministry?
I would tell you that I think that the spiritual disciplines are underutilized for handling mental health issues.
Okay.
I say that because, one, I think prayer is a useful thing that people ought to consider because it gives you an opportunity to be honest with yourself, be honest with God. And if you get in a routine of it, it's a predictable pattern for you. In the crazy things of life, if you can just have predictable patterns of this is when I'm going to talk to God. But then also we can go in multiple avenues. I think you need to go to prayer with gratitude. You need to go with a heart of thanksgiving. And that's beneficial for you because if you start the day like that, saying, hey, this is the day the Lord has made, I'm going to rejoice in it and be glad. And then, life going to come. But then I'm going the next day because it's still a good day. And come and pour your heart out to God. Guess what? That helps me. Like when a person comes to me and they poured their heart out to God, oh man, we can get to work now. But I had to come back and ask people, hey, I'm curious. You're telling me this. Have you talked to God about it? So I think there's one. I think also the scriptures are then we think about that, like reading the scriptures and even starting some of those places where it talks about the human experience, like Psalms, Lamentations, like Jeremiah, and really believing it. Really believing that that David is out here saying, hey, how long, O Lord, must I carry sorrow in my heart? How long, O Lord, must I take counsel within myself? Like really believing that. And then also just not dismissing like the fellowship of the body.
And so the basic things that we've been taught since we started going to church, these things still work and apply when we're struggling with our mental health challenges.
Right. And it's not saying that's going to fix it all, but it's saying like, hey, that's an avenue that I think you can utilize a little bit more.
It's a useful tool.
Yeah.
Well, we certainly appreciate you coming with us. You said a lot of good things. Well, I might have to listen to this again.
Part 2 next week.
So, all right, we love y'all. We see y'all next week. Appreciate it.